Hey, welcome to the Coach's Locker podcast with Chris Ford. This is episode 44. Hey, I hope you enjoyed last week's episode 43 with Pete Karavitas talking about his experience turning around that program at Sunny Hills. He's done a dynamite job there. Boy, if you did not listen to it, go back and listen to it, especially if you are in a place where they've been downtrodden. He won 8 games in back-to-back years, 2017, 2018. 8 games, the most they've won in 20 years. Ended up beating their rival for the first time in 7 or 8 years, back to the playoffs, and so check that out. Today, kind of same theme, back-to-back weeks, kind of the same theme, but a whole different story, a whole different coach. Today, we're going to hear from Bert Esposito. He's the head football coach at Temecula Valley High School here in Southern California. He took that program from 0-10 to 6-6. Yep, they got a playoff win. So think about that, folks. 0-10 to a playoff win in 1 year. 0-10 to 6-6. Not only 0-10, they were 1-19 in the 2 years before he got there. He started there in 2018. They went 6-6. He's turned around, I think, 4 programs this way, including like 0-10 to championship type stuff. Bert is a great coach. He's a good friend of mine. He's a great mentor. He's a great teacher. He's also the president of the Southern California Football Coaches Association. So we talk about that for just a few minutes too, and just, what that association's doing, why he enjoys volunteering his time for his peers, and just the growth of that association the last few years as well. So let's get it on.
You are listening to the Coach's Locker podcast with Chris Ford, a place for all coaches to call home. The Coach's Locker podcast is a part of the Football Coaching Podcast Network. Please visit footballcoachingpodcast.com to hear and see our entire lineup of top football coaches coming to you every single podcast with valuable information to help you and your program. The Coach's Locker podcast with Chris Ford exists to help prepare coaches to be hired for the job of their dreams and to provide coaches with dynamite resources to become even more successful in their field. You can reach me on Twitter at Coach4, that's at COACHFORE, and my podcast home is at 8laces.org/podcast. That's 8laces, EIGHTLACES.org/podcast. Welcome to the Coach's Locker podcast with Chris Ford. Now, let's get after it.
All right, as I mentioned on the intro, we're with Coach Bert Esposito, head football coach at Temecula Valley High School right here in Southern California. Coach, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So, Coach, we do something called the kickoff, the tip-off, and the first pitch. And this is just for our listeners to kind of get to know you just a little bit. 7 kind of quick questions here. Coach, what's the first team you ever played on, and what do you remember from that team? Either football or whatever sport. Doesn't matter what sport.
Oh, gosh. I mean, I started playing soccer as a little kid, but football-wise, I think the first team I played on was my 9th grade year at Fremont Junior High in Anaheim. It no longer exists. In fact, my last year there, which was my first year in football, they closed down due to Prop 13, I think it was. And anyway, we had a good football program. We were the lead-in to Anaheim High School back in the late 70s. Van Orbeck was actually the coach of Anaheim, and so the junior high did exactly the same thing. We had the same colors, same uniforms. It was phenomenal. It was a great legacy to get into. And I still remember my dad never wanted me to play football. He was a soccer guy. But my mom kind of snuck me in there.
Nice.
And the one thing I remember the most, I remember the first time I realized, okay, I got to either do this or I will never be forgiven by my teammates. I was on a punt return, and I was the up back. And I remember we had a kid on the team. He was just a monster. And I remember they punted the ball, and I see him beelining, and all I could think of is I either let this guy go or I take him on. And I decided right before contact, I'm just going to give it everything I got. And I think he knocked me out. Because the next thing I know, I'm looking around and everybody's running back, and I did hit him and I did knock him down, but I don't remember the play. So that was the one image I had of my very first year playing football.
That's outstanding. I'm impressed your mom's the one who got you in. I mean, that kind of speaks to the times of the 70s compared to today. A lot of
absolutely.
Not all. I don't want to offend any women listening here, but a lot of moms are keeping their kids out of football these days,
Yeah. My mom just saw that, it was something I really wanted to do. And she always was like, no matter what, you're going to follow your dreams. So that was what she was like.
That's awesome. Coach, what about the last team you played on, and what do you remember from that?
Well, it's funny. I tried to play in junior college, and I just kept getting hurt. But my last game as a high school senior, I do remember. It's a great little story. Actually, the first game of my high school career, I got out of the car on my first day to go into school, and I found $40 on the ground. I'll never forget this. I looked around, nobody around, nothing. So I took those $40 and I bought me a pair of cleats, Adidas Top 10 cleats. I still remember. And they were rubber soled, a lot of cleats on the bottom, and they were almost like AstroTurf cleats. And I bought these cleats, and I was going in high school as a sophomore back then. And I lasted those 3 seasons with the same pair of cleats. And I remember my last game, I threw like 4 touchdowns in my last game. And I remember I was running for a touchdown, and I made a cut, and my shoe just erupted open. My foot came out of my shoe.
Wow.
and it totally broke on the outside edge all the way. I obviously I fell down, got to the sideline, taped it up, finished the game. And on my way out to the bus, I dropped them in the trash. And I thought, how ironic. I find $40 to buy me a pair of shoes that lasted me my whole high school career. And I threw them out after my last game. I don't know why that stuck with me my whole life.
That's amazing. That's a great story.
Yeah.
Coach, who's been one or two of your main mentors in this coaching profession?
Well, I'll tell you, in high school, I had 3 head football coaches.
Wow.
And, every year they just, kept another one. And then my senior year, Dave DeWoody took over, and he's actually an 8-man legend in Riverside County. He was at Riverside Christian, and before that, he was a legend. Won a couple of CIF titles back in LA County, and so anyway, he took over after the second game of my senior year. And boy, I used to hate him. He was just hard nosed, and but I did everything I could. I was like the perfect coach's player, and as it turned out, I love him to death. We are still friends to this day. He comes to some of my games, and I just got such a respect for this guy and how he approached the game with hard discipline and ethics, but he was funnier than anybody I've ever met. And so he combined that humor with hard work, and he was just a great guy and still is. And that's my one mentor. Outside of that, it's just been a combination of different guys that I've been around and everything. But Dave DeWoody is my guy.
Great coach. Is he coaching anymore?
I thought he was doing something up in Corona, but I don't know. I don't know if that was a year-to-year thing. I mean, he's in his 70s now. He's still great. He has tremendous energy and everything. I mean, he'd probably coach another 10 years.
Yeah, he's a great coach. Coach, what's the worst mistake you ever made in coaching?
Boy, I had to think about that one for a long time. And honestly, I don't think it was so much a mistake, but every coach goes through a thing where you make a decision that you kind of go, why did I do that?
Yeah.
And it happened to me about 20 years ago. I took on a job. I'm not going to mention names or anything, but I took on a job that I probably shouldn't have taken on, but I did because I was enamored by the athletes and it was closer to home and all that. And I started noticing behind the scenes things that I didn't like with the admin and how they were handling things and all that. And by the second game of the year, I had gone home and I told my wife, this will be it. I'm going to be one and done here. I just did not like it. There was just a lot of things that went against my beliefs and how you're supposed to do things. And so, I ended up leaving there after the season. And it actually turned out to be the right move. And, the good Lord has always found a way to work out my situation, and it kind of led me to where I am today.
Outstanding. Coach, how about what are you most proud of, your greatest accomplishment as a coach so far?
That's also a tough one, but in a way, it's actually an easy one. I was fortunate enough in my first year as a head coach, I was 26, to win a CIF title. And I thought, rookie head coach, I win CIF. We finished second in the state. I go, this is easy,
Yeah.
And
every year.
Yeah. And I think the only accomplishment I really have since then that in that area is that I've taken four different schools to at least the CIF semifinals. But honestly, I think the greatest accomplishment is kind of what I've always wanted to be known as, or, you want to look back as, when you're ready to retire, is what do you want to be looked at? And that is no matter what kind of talent and where I was as a coach. I've taken four programs from 0-10. I didn't go 0-10, but I took them from 0-10 to either a CIF championship, semifinals, or league championship by the second year. But really what it was the fact that I always wanted to be known as a consistent program. I wanted to look back and go, it didn't matter what kind of talent we had. We were consistent. We got the most out of our kids, and we got them to college, and all that to me was like, anybody can win a title here and there. It depends on what kind of talent you have, the right situation. But can you do all those things consistently for a long time? That's kind of always been my goal, and I think so far, it's kind of come to fruition.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to talk about that soon here, Coach. What's your favorite? I know you like the beach. What's your favorite vacation spot?
I tell you, I've been a lot of places because I love to travel, and honestly, I love taking my RV with my wife and two daughters, and I love going to Camp Pendleton's Del Mar Beach and RV in there. I feel totally safe. It's on the base. Yeah. You got guys with, security guys everywhere just taking care of you. There's no riffraff, and I literally take my RV and I sit on the beach for, a week straight, and just no clock, no nothing. And, I've been a lot of places, and that seems to be the one place where I just love life.
Yeah, that's a great place. So I've known Coach Esposito for a long time. I think, Coach, back in 2001 when I first started at Linfield, I met you way back then. And I'm friends with Coach on Facebook, and I see all these RV posts, and I'm like, this has been a dream of mine forever. I don't own an RV, but I want to go rent one someday. And so my wife's never been with that whole dream and plan of mine, right? But so finally 2 years ago, I go rent an RV. We go down to the Rose Parade. I'm thinking that'll be a fun place, just a little 2 nights away. And what ends up happening, folks, is the worst trip of my life. and then my wife's just like, told you so. So we're down there the first night at about midnight. My son my 12-year-old, my oldest boy, Dad, I got to throw up. So I'm like, okay, well, maybe the kid had too much pizza, So he gets up, throws up outside. And then about an hour later, I hear the RV door open, and I freak out. And it's him throwing up again. Not to be too graphic, but over the course of the next 4 hours, the dude throws up. My son, who's a tough kid, he throws up 10 times. He's sick as a dog. So I call my wife at 7, explain it to her. She's ticked off, and because the plan was for he and I to go down there for 2 nights to save our spot, and then my wife and the other 2 kids were going to come down on the 3rd night. So she's like, all right, I'll come get him and drop off the kids. I told you, he's probably sick. And so she drops off the kids, right? My 2 youngest, who are 8 and 6 at the time. Well, we have a great day. We go over to the Rose Parade, check out all these floats being made. We go walk around the stadium, the Rose Bowl. It's just a great day. About 9 o'clock that night, my daughter starts throwing up. So sure enough, man, and she pukes all over. There was a bed above the seat, the chairs where you drive. She pukes all over that thing, Coach. And I'm like,
oh my God.
I'm done. I'm going home. So New Year's Eve at about 9:00, we pack up the trailer. I start driving to Apple Valley, and I'm pissed. I'm sad. I'm angry. And all of a sudden, here I am driving down the up to 15 freeway, and 3 or 4 drops of her puke start falling on me.
Oh,
I thought I'd gotten them all picked up, and I get back, and my wife's like, "We're never doing an RV again."
Oh my God! You got
awful.
the worst of everything. 'Cause I've never had a bad experience in an RV.
I know.
So somehow, you just, I don't know.
I told her I ain't a quitter. I'm gonna do it again someday, but it was awful, man. But the ocean is a great place to hang out. Coach, what's your favorite thing to do outside of coaching and your own family?
Man, that's a tough one because for a long time I had no hobbies, none at all. Everything was football and my family, and of course, I love to travel. And a few years ago, I finally just said, you know what? I've always wanted a Harley, and so I went out and I bought myself a chopper. It's a bar hopper, and not really made for long journeys. And but I totally look forward to just getting out and riding my Harley, and just getting away from it all. And I put my leathers on, and nobody knows who I am. And I just pick spots out and I go, and you're on edge. You feel alive, and that's kind of my fun thing to do right now. Besides, of course, I like to shoot guns. So, building a gun collection and doing that whole thing. So those are really the 2 things I do besides football.
How was Kelly with you getting a motorcycle like that?
Kelly is a unique human being. She loves me to death and just said, you know what, if this is what you want to do, I support you 1,000%. And she has been nothing but supportive in anything I've ever done. Matter of fact, she tries to join me as much as possible, but I told her, no, you're not going on the Harley. I said, one of us has to be here for the kids.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's true. Coach, I don't have this on my script of questions here, but one thing I've always appreciated about your family is your wife, Kelly, I think has done your stats for a long time. And then your 2 girls have been on the sidelines for a long time. Can you talk to me about that? Because that's kind of unique.
Yeah, when Kelly and I first started dating, was right when I was about to become the head coach for the first time. And, we had a group of friends. And so every Friday night, I'd be scouting or playing. And all of our friends would be doing other stuff. So I finally just said, if you want to be with me and, hang out with me, this is what I do. So she joined me while we were dating. And so we made the most of it. We'd go and have dinner, like I've actually gone scouting in Needles. And we would drive out there, and we didn't even, back then it was a Thomas guide. Yep. So, we would try to find the place. Forget it. We'd get there, we'd see the lights, and we'd go right to the lights, and that's where the school was. And so she would videotape and I would take notes, and then we'd go dinner. And so that became our thing. And ever since then, she has been on my sideline for 26 years as a head coach. And she has done my stats, and that's kind of our thing. And she, on Sundays, we'll sit down in front of the TV and we'll go over the film and double check the stats and get it all going. And my girls, of course, to keep everybody out of the stands, that's what we did, because you know how brutal fans can be. Yeah. So she never had to listen to all that stuff. The kids never had to listen to it. They were down the field getting involved, and it really helped all of us. I have coaches on my staff right now who their wives do not even like football in the slightest, and I'm like, how do you do it? Because if my wife didn't love football and love me, it would never happen.
Yep. That's good. When I was the same way, Coach. I was dating my wife right before we got engaged. I became the head coach, and I sat down and talked with her one day. I said, hey, don't marry me unless you want to deal with this. And I laid out here's what being a head football coach is like. Here's what my weekends look like, 10, maybe 14 weeks out of the year. And I kind of tried talking her out of it, but she still married me. So
no, it's true. I did the exact same thing. Matter of fact, when we got married, I got engaged to her right at the beginning of the season so that we didn't have to get married until spring break.
Oh, there you go.
Just so it would be away from the depths of football.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we have very light stories as far as making sure our wives were on board.
Yeah. So, Coach, you were a head coach for a long time before leaving Temecula Valley, I think after the 16 season. How long were you a head coach before that? About
20. Well, I was 13 years at Paloma, and then before that, it was since 1991. So I've been a head coach since 1991 till now, except for 2 seasons.
Okay.
One when I was a OC at La Sierra after the Rancho Verde season, and then the other one was 2 seasons ago at Chaparral.
Coach, what's it like moving from being a head coach to being an assistant? I did that from 11 to 12. I did that, so I have my view of it. But what was like for you as a head coach? You were a head coach for a long time, especially one place, Paloma, for so long, and then moving to be an assistant at Chaparral. What was that like for you?
Well, I tell you, it's not for everybody, and I'm not even so sure it was right for me, other than the fact that when I went to Chaparral, I was not intending to be coaching that year. I wanted to basically go around and you know how some coaches go and visit other teams and see how things are going, because you don't get to do that when you're constantly coaching. So my whole plan was to do that. I was going to go officiate and just kind of enjoy my time off, because I thought there's no way I'm going to get another job as a head coach, because I'm not going to change districts.
Yeah.
And so I kind of had to deal with the fact that my head coaching career might be over. And then all of a sudden I met with Jeremy McCullough over at Chaparral, and we talked, met the staff, and I liked the guy. I liked what he was doing. And so he asked me to be the quarterback coach, and I was like, okay, yeah. Now, I took that on, and I enjoyed the experience, and it was fun. But I realized during that season, I am not an assistant coach. I have way too many things that, I've had in the past, been successful at, and, you get ingrained in how you do things. And it was difficult for me to do things differently, but I committed myself to be the type of assistant coach to Jeremy that I felt like I would want my assistant coaches to be. So I was very supportive. I did all that, and I did it for a year, but I don't know how long I would have lasted doing that, just because, once you've been a head coach as long as I have, it's hard to give up the reins, because you have the big picture of what you see the outcome being. But if it wasn't for Jeremy and the guys over there having a great time, I probably wouldn't have done it again.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, you're right. I don't think it is the right move for everybody. I know when I made that move, it was kind of a big, it was kind of the same thing I went through, Coach. I went to be the athletic director at the school, and then, the head coach kind of helped me get that job, and then asked me to coach the special teams, and it went okay, but yeah, I sat there a lot going, man, I would do this different, I would do that different. I think we could be better this way or that way, and that was hard for me to, just kind of put aside the pride or what have you and do that. But the other part of it, Coach, it was really nice to leave when that whistle blew. And,
you got that right.
And not have to do everything else. That was really nice.
That was definitely the one thing that highlighted every day was I never had to deal with a parent or issues or anything. I mean, I had fun. I rode my motorcycle to work or to coaching, and I rode my motorcycle out, and I was like, man, I could never do this before, Yeah. And ironically, here's another thing that I just thought of that is kind of rare. Matter of fact, I haven't really heard of it before, and it's happened to me twice. I've actually become the head coach of a school because the previous head coach called me up and said, I want you to take my job.
Oh, wow.
And, it's happened to me twice. And that to me is like, I guess I must be doing something right, because for a guy to call you and just say, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. I want you to do it. And both times the previous head coach coached under me and like was an assistant to me.
Okay.
And I didn't know either head coach before they did that. Isn't that weird?
That's a really weird thing. Well, reputation ends up preceding yourself, you know?
Yeah.
So, Coach, in 2017, December of 17, you become the head coach at Temecula Valley. For those who don't know, outside of Southern California, they had a guy, kind of a legend there. Bud Kane was there for, I think, opened up the school in the late 80s. And he was there for a long time. And then they went
20 years.
Yeah. And then they went through 5 head coaches in 11 years. I've seen that's been a trend in football coaching. As you get a guy in one place for a very long time, it becomes difficult to follow him. You didn't follow him. You were the 5th coach. But what did you identify and see in all those coaching turnover after Bud that kind of made you want to take that job, or did you have hesitation because of that turnover?
Well, no, not at all, because I am a Temecula person. I've been in town here 25 years. I knew Bud personally because I was Linfield's coach when I first got out here. So I was Linfield's coach in the last golden age of Bud's career. And so I kind of seen what he was doing and everything. And at the time, Temecula Valley was the only show in town. Then Chaparral opened, and then Great Oak opened. And that has a toll on guys too, because, the kids, it gets watered down. So when Bud left, he left, I think, at the right time. The talent was, being distributed around, and, he, for whatever reason he left, he left, and, he's still around. But I felt bad for the guy after him, because he actually played for Bud. And I watched this whole thing. I became friends with him as well, Maxwell.
Yeah.
Maxwell came from Santa Margarita. He was the OC. Now, here's where the issue came up. He's coming in, talent's dwindling, and now he's never been a head coach, and he's been an OC at a huge, successful private high school in South Orange County. Well, you're talking apples and oranges for what they did and what he came over, and, of course, without any experience. Now, the thing that I thought was kind of a big mistake that I don't know if the community or anybody did, was they hailed him as the next coming. And I felt bad for Maxwell because he had never had, coaching experience. And, boy, they came after him when he wasn't winning, and that was tough. And, I think he won like 2 games in 2 years or something like that.
Yeah.
And that kind of just started the downward spiral, and then McGowan took over after him, and he's been a stalwart with Bud. So I kind of seen this whole thing. It was a fight because the other 2 high schools in town were getting all the kids, and Temecula kind of took a plunge, except for the wrestling program.
Yep.
Okay. And then, so I just kind of watched it. And then when the Temecula job opened, I thought to myself, it's a perfect time. I'm not coaching at Paloma anymore. And I actually watched some film on them, and I thought, hey, they got some kids, and we can build on this thing. And I really wanted to be a coach of the high school, the namesake high school of the town I've lived in for 25 years. And I had a very good connect. I knew teachers there. So it was really like an almost perfect situation for me, and I think for them. And, it never, this was the 4th program, like I said, that I've taken over that was down in the dumps, and I thought, well, let's see if I can do it again. Yeah. And so we did,
Yeah, you have been kind of that turnaround guy, Coach. You've done a tremendous job. Let me read the records before you took over there at Temecula: 1-9, 1-9, 5-5, 5-5, 1-9, 3-7, 6-5, 4-6, 1-9, 0-10. So you basically had one season in about a dozen where they won more games than they lost. A lot of, you got 4 1-9 seasons, 0-10 the year before you got there. So, and since 07, they only made the playoffs once. You guys took that program under your leadership from 17th in the section, 0-10, to 6-6, ranked fifth in the section. 2006, I was at a program. They went from winless the year before I got there to 5-5. And that year there were 50 teams that went winless in 2005, and then only one went 500 the next year, and that was us. And the reason I use that example is I wasn't able to spend the time researching this. I don't know how many teams went winless in 17 and then 500 in 18, but back then when I just shared, out of 50 teams, only one could manage to go 500 or better. So what you did there in just 1 year is an amazing turnaround. 6-6, back to the playoff. Not only playoffs, but won a game there, right?
Yeah. We were 2 points from the semis.
Yeah, just amazing. So, Coach, what do you attribute the number one thing you attribute to the turnaround?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I get asked it every time we turn a program around, and obviously there's a lot of factors involved, but I think the number one thing that I bring in is the culture that I, expect. And regardless of what they've done in the past, I've never gone into a school and say, well, the guys before you, they all stunk and this and that. I never downplay the previous coach or program. To me, I hear guys do that all the time, and I'm thinking to myself, that's not your job. They did the best they could with what they had. So we had to reprogram all these kids, because they were pretty beat down, and they were negative about everything. There was no confidence. And every time I've gone somewhere to do this, that's exactly what I see. I'm a pretty hard-nosed guy, so I have high expectations, and I'm really big on accountability. And so I had to come in, and the first thing I had to do was meet the parents. After I talked with the administration, and, I basically told the principal, you're going to get some parents. They're going to come. They're going to complain. Just send them back to me. Don't try to make it nice with them or anything. Just send them back to me, because no one here is going to understand. And so, you set your accountability, and, they're going to fight you on it. And I just sat back in doing what I've always done, and I have a lot of confidence in that, and went through the process of changing the culture, changing their attitudes, having them believe in themselves, small little successes, all these things add up. And then really it comes down, there's some pressure, especially in that first game of the next season you take over. Can you win that first game? And every time I've done it, we've won that first game.
Nice.
So that's huge.
Yeah. So, Coach, did you have those conversations with parents? I mean, I know your coaching style a little bit. I'm sure you went in there, and like you just said, high expectations. So you raised the bar from a team who didn't even win one game the year before. They were 1-19 in 2 years. You go in there and raise the bar. A lot of coaches make the mistake of lowering the bar, right? So then when you raise that bar, you are going to have players who aren't able to jump over it, or I think not. It's not that they aren't able; they don't know how, right?
Right.
So how did you get your players to jump over that new bar you've raised?
I think a lot of it is, and I attribute this maybe to even just my personality. And I don't hear a lot of coaches talk about this. When I did my master's years ago, I did a whole thing on, traits of successful football programs and questionnaires and all that. And one of the top attributes to success is the personality of the guy in charge. Yeah. How does he get people to buy in and believe? If he's a real quiet, kind of guy, then there's got to be something about him that he challenges people, or, whatever it is. I think somehow, some way, the way I do things kind of attributes to that. And, I also come in and I say, and again, my first team that I won a CLP title with in my first year as a head coach, we only had 16 players. So I always bring up the fact that, I want to see a title with 16 guys. So you're either on board with us or, you can go do whatever else you want. So it's making the kids feel like they're being part of something special, and you got to create those environments. You got to create those things. And so, we went to passing tournaments, and, I kind of handpicked certain teams we played and stuff to help our kids get some success. And, there's a lot to it, but really it's, that's what I feel is the biggest part of it.
Absolutely. Coach, you guys, how did you deal with the coaches on staff there from that 0-10 season? How did you communicate with them? I mean, how did you go about deciding who you're going to keep, who you're going to let go, who are you going to bring in with you, that sort of thing? How did you put your staff together?
Okay, that's a good question, and it's always asked. The first thing, like I said, I do not put the other programs down, the other year down and everything. When I first came in, I got a hold of every coach on that staff, and I tried to set appointments with them. I ended up interviewing almost 50 guys between the previous staff and just other people in the community. See, the good thing, too, that helped me is everybody read on the internet about my background, so that kind of helped. They're like, oh, this guy's done it before, and, they all knew about me and what we did, so people wanted to get on board. So my big thing, and with my assistant head coach, Juan Marita, and he's my OC as well, we decided we'll take care of the X's and O's. I wasn't looking for guys that, they got to be football geniuses or anything like that. Although we got some guys that really know football. I said, the thing that I want is guys that love kids, love teaching, and personality-wise fit in with our core group of coaches. So that was my three main things I interviewed for. And when it was all said and done, a handful of guys that were on the previous staff stayed with us. And then I had to bring in some other guys. But as long as they held true to those three factors, I wasn't concerned about have they coached 20 years or any of that stuff. Do you love kids? Are you a good teacher, and do you fit in with all of us? And that's kind of how I picked my staff.
How many of the guys who were on staff there stayed aboard with you?
There was kind of like this thing. There was half the staff was from a competitive high school. It was kind of weird. And the previous head coach brought in a lot of guys from there. And then the other half were guys that had been around through all the bad times. And I'll be honest, most of those guys are the ones I kept. I only had one guy from the other high school that stayed because and actually he's not even with us this year. So it really was, I kept the guys that I felt loved these Temecula Valley kids and were willing to do whatever it took to get them out of it. We had one coach who's like, he didn't even know how to experience winning because the last 2 years they didn't win. So he actually made a vacation trip during the first week of the playoffs.
Oh, that's
and I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And he goes, well, we don't go to the playoffs here. And I said, we will now.
Yeah.
And that was kind of funny.
That's awesome. And Coach, what's the first thing you remember, like your first team meeting? Do you remember kind of how that went?
Yeah. Of course, a bunch of kids come walking through the door, and I'm a big watch your body language kind of guy. And I could just see the lack of pride and confidence in these kids. They were just coming in, and I felt bad for them. I mean, here I am. For our senior class this year, I'm the third guy to come in and say, hey, if we do this and this and that, we're going to win. And, I could just see their faces were like, yeah, we've heard that before. And so I didn't attack the previous. I didn't even attack anything about the negatives. What I said was, I'm coming in here and we're going to change this thing. And here's what we're going to do. And I laid out the plan, expectations, how I want them to, celebrate a touchdown, how communication is huge with me. They had to call me if they were ever going to miss a practice. I either had to have a text, email, or a call. I mean, I had to, from that first meeting, they just all were just looking at me quiet, did not know what to expect. And so I took the burden of not putting everything on them. They've been through a lot. And so my thing was, I'll carry the burden. I'll take care of all the other things. You guys just work on getting yourself stronger, faster, and we'll go through this process. And I guarantee you, in the fall, you will be very pleased. And I think my experience had me be a lot more confident in telling them that than most coaches would do, because I've seen it work many times.
Yeah, Coach, that I loved what you said, especially about the body language and just having to change that mentality. I know, kind of similar. I've only really gone into one place that was winless the year before, and that's some of those things you just said are the same things I had to deal with. So it's very interesting to hear you talk about that, Coach. You are a head coach at Temecula, but you teach at Paloma Valley. To a lot of guys nationwide hearing this, they do not understand that concept at all. They just don't understand California and how we work.
Yeah.
What was that like for you doing that? I mean, I'm sure that's got to be a little bit of a headache. There's probably some pluses to it. Talk to me about that a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. It's very interesting. And I think in a way it might be trend setting some future opportunities for coaches. Here's the situation. You get a guy like me who's been around a long time. He's invested in his district. He can't just get up and move. This is very common. So what's been happening in the past is you get a guy, and even Bill Powell from San Jacinto, same scenario. 20 years. He was 9-1 when he wasn't the coach anymore in his last year. Now you're looking at us here. We have all this success, all this training and years of experience. And now what do? Well, in the past, it would have been a lot more difficult, but technology to me is a saving grace. And so I knew that even though I was teaching at another high school, even when I was there and was the head coach there, I never really saw my kids during the day. They were out in classes and all that. There were times it was an advantage, but what I did was I made connections through email, through Skyping, through pictures and all that. And I was able to follow my kids in the weight room. I had a previous coach would videotape the kids lifting. And if I saw a kid on the phone that was on his cell phone, sitting on the side, not lifting, I literally called the kid during the class and told him, you need to get up and get going.
Awesome.
So these kids knew that I was watching them 24/7. So that was a big help for me. Also, the teachers at the school, I communicated with them with emails. I think a lot of them thought I was on campus.
Wow.
Because we would converse on email. They'd send me any issues came up. I would get the email and print it up. And then when I got to practice, I'd pull that kid aside and deal with it. So in a way, it was pretty much what I'd always been doing. Other than I just never crossed paths with the kids at school. But I do have 4 on-staff coaches, which, that was kind of a big thing when I hired them. And they do a lot of that for me. And so in reality, it really wasn't a problem. And the unique thing at Temecula is there's only 3 or 4 on-staff coaches at Temecula that are head coaches at Temecula. Baseball, basketball, football, track, we're all walk-on head coaches, and everyone's been successful. So it's kind of interesting, now, is it better than not being on campus? No. I mean, you want to be on campus. You want to see the kids at lunch and all that. Can it be done? I think we've proven that it can be done. And so that's kind of how, it's worked. And I saw that coming. And, when I talked to the principal, I said, oh, no, we'll be able to handle that. And that's how we were also able to do the academic stuff, which was a huge part of our process.
Yeah, and for those guys outside of California who don't understand, what happens is you get your tenure, right? You're a tenured teacher at your district. So, like, Bert, how long were you at Paloma Valley? Or how long have you been there?
I just finished my 15th year.
Yeah, so since he's been there 15 years, if you were to go to Temecula, do you know how many years they accept over there? Probably 7?
They take up to 7, yeah.
Yeah, 7 years is kind of standard, a lot of districts.
Yep.
And so that's what it is, guys. First of all, a PE position would have to come over to Temecula. would have to come open.
Yep.
And those are very difficult to come open. They can't just move a teacher because you have security blanket with your tenure. So, but even if one came open, coach would then have to go from step 16, 17 in his district. He'd have to go all the way back down to step 8 because they'd take 7 years in. And, you know, that's
really mine was
a lot of money.
Mine was 26 years because when I came to that district, they accepted all my previous years, which is very rare.
That is very rare.
So yeah,
I
would have taken a 20-year cut.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah. No, it's, you know, and even a lot of guys in California don't understand this. I've become very familiar with the process over the years, and it's a teacher union contract issue. There are guys out there who go, oh no, they can always negotiate that. That's what I have people tell me. In some districts, yes. I know of a guy in Southern California here who was able to go in and say, if you want me to be your head coach, you're going to have to give me this many years. And I don't want to give too many details to give him away, but he got a lot of his years, okay? There is room for negotiation sometimes, but it's got to be a district where it's got to be a very unique district. You know, that's my high school where I grew up, my alma mater, Fallbrook High School. In 2000, they wanted a coach named Randy Blankenship there who was very successful as a coach, and they changed their entire contract over a 2-period day. You know, it's only one line in their contract, but they had the same thing. We're only going to accept 7 years. The superintendent, the principal, the athletic director, and the teacher union head all met with Randy in a hotel room and said, you know, at a clinic, you know, what are you making now? What do you need, basically? And Fallbrook came back and said, okay, we're changing from 10 years or 7 years. You can bring 10 years, and then after that, you get 2 years for every 1 year. So they developed a brand new formula to get their head football coach. The districts who do that these days, I don't know, I'd say less than 2% of them, you know? Very few do. Coach, let's talk about offense. I know that's your baby. You're an offensive mastermind here in Southern California. Some of the stats I did last night, in league play, the year before you got there, they scored 37 points. You guys scored 126. That's an increase of 240% in 1 year. Overall, the Temecula Valley Golden Bears went from 34 to 350 points in one season. That's an increase of 316%. I mean, that's amazing. Points allowed, they went from 203 points allowed to just 131 points. That's a 35% decrease. So you can see these X and O numbers, the increases in offense and decreases in defense is what helped you win games. 2 years ago, they scored just 118 points on the entire season. You guys scored 126 in just half the time. That's amazing. In the last 14 years, what I kind of call the Max Preps era, because all these stats are on Max Preps, they've only scored more than 350 points, which is what you guys did in 2018. They've only scored more than 350 one time. And at that point, it was just an extra field goal, 353 points way back in 2004. So, Coach, a lot of stats there. How did you revolutionize this offense in just 1 year? Because those are some amazing turnaround numbers in 1 year.
Yeah, that's an interesting point because we never even considered that or looked into it. You know, we just do what we do. And one of the things that we changed right away, we noticed right away that the previous seasons at Temecula, they hardly ever let kids play both ways. And so some of our most dynamic players on offense last year had never played offense in high school. And so we evaluated the talent we had. I mean, our quarterback last year is not even a quarterback. He if you look at his mechanics and everything, he's not very good in that manner, but he was a man-child. And so when things broke down was when he was the most dynamic, and he would make these amazing plays. He's going to go play inside linebacker at Wyoming. That's what we had as a quarterback. Yeah. And so we had to literally do what we always do. But we have a system that we use, and we stick to it. We have a practice plan format that we use. That is, I love our practices. I think that's the one thing. I've had college coaches come down and go, man, you guys really know how to practice. And so I think a combination of all that and we play in one of the toughest leagues in the state. So, those stats, I was like, dang, that's against some pretty good teams.
Yeah, it is.
So, so it's just, we have a system. We do what we do. We put the best kids we can everywhere. We let kids play both ways. Last year, almost to a fault, I think we wore out by the time we got to the quarterfinals. We lost a couple kids in that game to injury, and we just wore out. I had no depth. We'll be in better position for that this year, only because I've had more time to develop kids. But really, I think that's what it really came, is putting the right kids in the right places, not being scared of letting them play just one way, also managing them during the game, how we rotate them in so they don't get exhausted and all that. Just a combination of all that and doing what we do.
Coach, you've been an up-tempo, no-huddle offensive guy since before that was cool, I mean,
Yep.
you really have for a long time. You've been doing what guys kind of transitioned to, I don't know, maybe 5-6 years ago when guys got to that up-tempo, no-huddle stuff. You've been doing that forever. So talk to me a little bit about your offensive philosophy and why you have been doing that for so long.
That's a good point. Back in the late 90s, I've always gone to schools where they had zero success. They didn't have the dudes. So you get tired of getting beaten down by these big dudes, and you don't have tight ends and that can match everybody. So it just came as, what do we do to survive? So back when I went to Ramona in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was only Matt Logan and I were really the only teams in Riverside County that didn't have a tight end. And a matter of fact, my defense coordinator at the time argued with me and basically quit because I said, we're going to go no huddle, no tight end. And he's like, that's impossible. You'll never win. And I said, I disagree. And he quit because he couldn't understand what was going on. And so we ended up that next year, we went to the semifinals with a team that had lost 22 in a row before I got there 2 seasons previous. So we just kind of took off with that. And I just figured the best way to be able to win games with the kind of talent I had was to coach my tail off in the off season, teaching them how to catch, run routes, things like that, where you didn't need to be super big or physical like everybody else was doing. And it used to frustrate people. I remember guys, we used to run a shallow route where we'd run right behind the defensive line, and old time coaches would go, that'll never happen. We'll blitz this, we'll do that. And I'd say, you go right ahead. He's going to be wide open. And lo and behold, we'd start doing that. And so it was just seeing things ahead of where everyone else was seeing it. And then, of course, it got to be very vogue, and now it's, all over. Now, I'm not saying I invented that stuff. A lot of stuff I did, I stole or I just created through common sense. And but it was a survival thing at the time.
That's amazing. That's a very cool story. You go from surviving to thriving with what you've done offensively. Coach, I saw on Max Preps shows a roster size of 104 right now. Is that accurate?
No, I think I got to get rid of some of those guys.
Okay.
We're probably varsity and JV right now. We're about 90.
Okay, so you've still, you've grown the program by probably 15-20% from last year, yeah?
Yeah. And and again, when I was at Paloma, we'd get 200 kids, all three levels, 180 to 200. I think at the same time, we try to do some fun things to create an excitement. And, I don't cut kids. They cut themselves. I have all these little things. But in the big scope of things, more kids want to be part of the football program than football really needs them. Because we have a lot of kids that, are not that talented. But we try to create a special situation, and guys just want to be a part of it. And, yes, I am very hard on them, but I think in the long run, kids realize, hey, that's what we need.
Yep.
And I still believe that today. Kids today need structure. They need someone in charge of them that they feel secure in, that's taking care of them. And, I'm not a big believer on a 14-year-old knows the direction of his life. He doesn't know that. So
Well
I'm a big believer that, you know what, I'm going to tell you what you need to know. When you become a man, then you get to take what I've told you, what your parents have told you, and then you get to decide for yourself. Yeah. And that's just kind of my belief,
No, I agree. One of my favorite coaches around is a ton of success. I got to know him. We played in the same league. Well, we didn't play. He whooped me for 3 years in the same league, Harry Welch.
Yeah.
And
yes.
He's very, very hard on his kids. One of my players, after I left that school, one of my players transferred to play for him. And after that first season he played for him, I asked this kid, Johnny, hey, because he became a stud there for them. And I said, what's it like?
Yeah.
What's it really like playing for the man now? And he said, Coach, I hate that guy during practice, but as soon as it's over, I love him to death. And he said,
exactly.
He's a guy I'm going to reach out to and be friends with forever now that I've graduated. And I thought that put it, very sustained. And I said, why do you hate him so much during practice? And he said, because he's so hard on us. And that's just so counterculture now, to be hard and be hard on kids and all that stuff. And I said, well, then why did you love him after the whistle blew after practice? And he said, because at the end of the day, he cares about us deeply, and that's why he is so hard on us. And I really love that.
That's an interesting point you bring, because in my master's program, I did my whole thing. And the number one attribute to successful programs by coaches all over the country that came out numerically and everything was toughness. That was the number one attribute of all successful football programs. And it wasn't even close. And when you really break that down, football is all about toughness. Absolutely. It don't matter how fast, how strong. If you're standing on the sideline, you're not helping your team, because you're all going to get hit. You're all going to get knocked down. How tough are you to overcome is really what football is all about. And you can't teach toughness unless you put kids and people in tough situations. And then you got to be there to support them and help them to not quit and drive them through. And in the long run, to me, that's what changes lives. That's what changed my life. And us tough guys type coaches, we're getting pushed out of the business because of how our culture is today. But you know what? I believe, and I am going to hang on to what I have always known to work. Yes, you can adjust a little bit. I do play music at practice. I still do some nice, fun things. But when we practice, we practice. And to me, that's the difference.
Coach, to wrap this up, and this has been great, I really appreciate your time. You served as the president of the Southern California Football Coaches Association for, I think, at least, about 6-7 years now?
It might be 7 or 8 now.
7 or 8 now, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you've done some great job, done a really good job in kind of rebuilding that thing as well, and starting some new programs within the Southern California Football Coaches Association. I'm the president of the California Coaches Association. There's guys who reach out to me throughout the year from all over the state asking, hey, I want to start this volleyball coaches association in this section. Or like right now, there's a group up in Northern California wanting to start a Northern California Football Coaches Association. And I always refer them to you. I don't know how many of them ever follow up, but talk to me a little bit about.
I've had a couple.
Yeah. Okay, good. Talk to me a little bit about why you enjoy serving in this role, serving your fellow coaches, and kind of, what you get out of being involved in the SoCal Football Coaches Association.
All right. Well, our association has been around for 62 years. And according to the old Constitution, it was only supposed to be for 1 or 2 years. But times have changed. Yeah, it's one of those things. I thought, okay, I could do this for a year or two, but times have changed, and so everything's changed. So here I am, 7, 8 years later. I don't know. You just keep going. But what we tried to do is bring it into the 21st century. And what you have is young coaches today are totally tech savvy and all these things. And in this day and age, as you can see, you go to Alaska up in Fairbanks and they're probably running spread offense with no huddle. Yeah. Whereas 20, 25 years ago, everybody was wing tee, power football, because that's what you learned by other coaches and you had to go to clinics to learn. Now information is out there. So the game has definitely changed. How you coach the game has changed. But one thing that has always held true is the interaction of not only player to coach, but coach to coach. And one thing that was being lost is that connection. And you can see it today with kids today. They'll text each other and they're sitting 3 feet away from each other instead of talking. And so as coaches, you can get a lot off of John Madden football. I see these young bucks all the time, think they can call an offense and all that stuff because they're really good at Madden football. But it's the people interaction that's being lost. And a lot of these old coaches who've learned a lot over their years, these young coaches are not really reaching out to them like they used to. So one of the things I really felt important with SIFCA was, and we're still battling it because, today's coaches, especially here in California, they're distracted. They got a million things to do. They don't really want to come together and just talk to each other and learn about, the off the field issues more than the X's and O's. And so we just really felt strong that we need to hang on to that. And slowly but surely, we're pulling people back in to understand you can't learn social networking on the internet. You got to get face to face. And so a big part of what we're doing is trying to get coaches back in, and understanding that mentoring, how an old coach, a lot of what I'm talking to you today was learned through experience. I didn't have somebody show me the ropes all the time. I was 26. I already had my own program. So I didn't get to be mentored in a great program for years before I took mine. So experience. Well, if you're a young buck and you want to gain some valuable information without having to go through 25 years of experience, you might want to connect with some of the older guys. You might want to talk about how do you handle a booster club, or how do you handle parents, admin, faculty, all these things. And in this day and age, here's the crazy thing. Most young coaches today are only going to last 3 to 5 years as a head coach before they get run out. Because once you mess up as a head coach, once something happens, the whole world knows. And this business, we all know each other and what's going on. So once you ruin your reputation, you probably won't get another head job again. So, you might want to make sure you do it right the first time. And so all these little factors have come in, and I just see it as I want to give back to the greatest game that changed my life, saved my life, and has given me, I have a good living doing what I love to do. And I don't want to see that game go away. And that's why I even got involved with Save Youth Football that we did a couple of years ago. Yeah. I want to make sure that the government and all these bureaucracies can't come in and just take away the greatest game ever.
Absolutely. Well, Coach, thank you for your leadership with SoCal Football Coaches Association. It has been fun to see it develop, and it's been fun to serve alongside you a little bit for that. And thanks for all your time here, sharing about your season at Temecula Valley. I know I'm going to be excited to watch those scores on Friday nights this year to see how you guys keep improving things there, Coach.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
We'll talk to you later. Hey, folks, I really hope you enjoyed that podcast with Coach Esposito. Coach, thank you so much for coming on. Folks, I would love some feedback. I would absolutely love this feedback from you. You can reach that feedback on iTunes. Would be great. Give me a few stars there, 5 if you like the thing. I'd really love that. It helps the podcast out. Email me, text me, Twitter me, whatever, at Coach4 on Twitter, at COACHFORE. My podcast home, if you don't know, you can find me 2 places, 8 Laces, EIGHTLACES.org. /podcast or on footballcoachingpodcast.com. Make sure, if you've never been to footballcoachingpodcast.com, make sure to go check out. There's 4 other podcasts hosted there, and that's a great site if you're in the podcast and in the football. Folks, thanks for joining us. We will see you next week.